The call lasted 17 seconds. At 9:42 p.m., Daniel Mercer's phone dialed 911. No voice. No request for help. No scream. Just 17 seconds of open line, breathing distant mechanical noise, then a sharp metallic impact before the call disconnected. 3 days later, Daniel's SUV was found burned near the East Caldwell Irrigation Canal. The interior was gutted. The interior passenger window shattered from the inside. In the driver's footwell, investigators recovered diluted blood. Enough to confirm injury. Not enough to confirm death. No body was ever found. If you believe disappearance always means death, consider staying through the reconstruction. Because in this case, the assumption of murder almost buried the truth. Daniel Mercer, age 41, mechanical engineer, married, 1 daughter. No criminal history. No financial distress. No known enemies. He left his suburban home at approximately 8:58 p.m. on a Thursday after receiving what his wife described as normal work message. He told her he needed to check something at the fabrication plant. An equipment issue. He would be back within an hour. He never returned. The fabrication plant's security logs show Daniel badging in at 9:16 p.m. Cameras captured him enter through north employee entrance. He was alone. He carried no tools, no bag. He moved with purpose. At 9:37 p.m., camera feed from Bay 3 experienced a 42-second blackout. At 9:42 p.m., Daniel's phone dialed emergency services. At 9:43 p.m., his phone powered off. The plant night supervisor, Harold Ives, reported nothing unusual. He claimed he was in the break room during that window. No alarms triggered. No machinery registered fault errors. The next morning, Daniel did not show up for work. By that evening, his wife, Clara Mercer, reported him missing. Detective Rachel Monroe reviewed the initial missing person intake 3 weeks after the vehicle was found. Once the case escalated from disappearance to presumed homicide. The file landed on her desk because the blood pattern in the SUV did not align with the initial responding officer's theory. The officer had written, likely blunt force trauma to driver while seated. Rachel circled that line. The blood in the footwell was cast off. Fine droplets angled downward. Not pooling, not arterial spray. The distribution suggested movement. Possibly standing. Possibly outside the vehicle before re-entry. And the shattered rear passenger window. Tempered glass breaks in distinctive patterns. Forensic analysis confirmed interior pressure caused outward fracturing, meaning someone inside that vehicle attempted escape. But no tissue was recovered from the window edges. No skin. No fabric fibers caught in the frame. Which raised the first question, was Daniel ever inside that SUV when it burned? Roland's narration reconstructed the timeline with restraint. Facts over emotion. Sequence over speculation. Thursday, 8:58 p.m. Daniel leaves home. 9:16 p.m. 9:37 p.m. Camera blackout in Bay 3. 9:42 p.m. 9:11 open line call. 9:43 p.m. Phone powered down. Saturday, 6:12 a.m. Burned SUV located 11 miles from plant. Distance from plant to canal 18-minute drive under normal traffic. Fire analysis determined accelerant use. Gasoline poured primarily along rear seats and cargo area. Ignition point likely rear passenger side. No fingerprints recovered. Heat damage extensive. Rachel visited the fabrication plant on her second day assigned. Bay 3 housed industrial press systems. Hydraulic units used for metal compression. Loud. Rhythmic. Mechanical. She requested archived audio logs from internal safety microphones. OSJ compliance required random acoustic monitoring to measure decibel exposure. Most investigators had ignored this. The 911 call recording was initially categorized as accidental dial. Background noise was labeled industrial environment. Rachel did not accept summaries. She isolated the 17 seconds. Second 14 an open line, faint rustling. Second 511 a low frequency mechanical cycling. Second 120 metallic impact sharper than the ambient machinery. Second 103 fix 6 nay what analysts first described as static. Second 107 disconnection. Rachel enhanced the waveform. The metallic impact did not match hydraulic press acoustics. It resonated higher, closer to hollow steel collision than press compression. And beneath the static, there was rhythm. Not machinery. Breathing. Labored. The first working theory suggested Daniel was injured during an equipment malfunction, panicked, dialed 911 unintentionally, then was abducted or murdered by unknown parties. But OSHA logs showed no equipment malfunction in Bay 3. Hydraulic pressure readings remained stable. No emergency stop engaged. No abnormal cycling, which meant either 1. The injury occurred off-grid, outside monitored systems. 2. The 911 call was staged. 3. Daniel dialed intentionally but could not speak. Rachel requested metadata on the phone's last GPS ping. It placed the device within the plant perimeter at 9:42 p.m. No subsequent movement logged before shutdown. She then examined badge-out records. Daniel never badged out. But at 9:44 p.m., 2 minutes after the call, another employee badge activated the north exit. Employee Victor Hale, maintenance technician. Victor claimed he left at 9:30 p.m. He insisted he was home by 10:00 p.m. His alibi, television streaming logs, and his wife's statement. Badge data contradicted him. When confronted, Victor stated it must have been a delayed system sync. He suggested Daniel may have borrowed his badge. There was no evidence Daniel possessed Victor's credentials. Rachel requested full access logs for the week. Victor Hale had accessed Bay 3 14 times outside his scheduled maintenance windows over the past month. Harold Ives, the supervisor, had accessed the same bay 12 times after hours. Neither could produce maintenance tickets justifying those entries. Financial records revealed something else. 3 weeks before Daniel's disappearance, he submitted an internal compliance complaint regarding unrecorded equipment calibration deviations. The complaint referenced potential safety violations and undocumented mechanical adjustments in Bay 3. The complaint was marked resolved 2 days later. No documentation of corrective action existed. Clara Mercer described Daniel as meticulous, not paranoid, not impulsive. She said he had seemed focused. The week before he vanished, she denied marital conflict. Phone records showed no extramarital communications. Bank accounts showed no unusual withdrawals. Insurance policy unchanged for 6 years. No motive found in the home, which redirected focus back to the plant. Rachel re-examined the 42-second camera blackout. IT logs showed manual override, not power failure. The override originated from a terminal in the maintenance office. User logged in Harold Ives. Harold claimed routine firmware update. IT department denied scheduling any update that evening. During a second interview, Harold's timeline shifted by 8 minutes compared to his initial statement. 8 minutes, exactly the length between the camera blackout and the 911 call. Rachel returned to the SUV. Fire investigators had focused on the accelerant. She focused on what survived. Under the rear seat frame, partially shielded from flame, technicians recovered a small fragment of blue industrial tape adhesed to metal bracing. The fabrication plant used blue tape exclusively for temporary machine labeling. Chemical composition matched inventory from Bay 3 supply, meaning the SUV had contact with plant materials. But there was more. In the vehicle's cargo area, beneath carbonized debris, lab techs identified trace amounts of fine aluminum particulate consistent with press shavings, microscopic fragments produced during compression cycles. Such shavings were common in Bay 3. They were not common in suburban driveways. Rachel now had convergence. Daniel files compliance complaint. Supervisor overrides camera feed. Maintenance tech accesses bay after hours. To 911 call originates during blackout. Plant materials found in burned SUV. Vehicle staged with accelerant. The working theory shifted. Possibility Daniel discovered undocumented mechanical alterations. He confronted someone. Violence occurred inside Bay 3. The 911 call captured the struggle. Body removed. SUV staged to simulate carjacking or random attack. But absence of a body complicated homicide charges. Without remains, prosecutors would hesitate. Rachel reviewed regional missing person databases for unidentified remains matching Daniel's profile. Nothing. She then requested soil samples from the irrigation canal site. Accelerant burn patterns suggested on-site ignition, not transport after fire, meaning the SUV likely arrived intact before being burned. Tire track impressions were partial but indicated a second vehicle present at the scene. Track width suggested mid-size pickup. Victor Hale owned a silver pickup truck. Search warrant executed. Truck bed contained no visible blood. However, luminol testing revealed faint trace patterns consistent with diluted biological residue along tailgate seams. Victor claimed he transported raw meat earlier that week, but no purchase receipts corroborated that claim. His phone location data placed him within 2 miles of the canal at 5:41 a.m. Saturday morning. He claimed he was out for a drive. Rachel did not arrest. Not yet. Because the 911 call still held something unresolved. She had acoustic specialists analyze the background frequency beneath the metallic impact. They isolated a repeating tonal spike at 60 Hz intervals, electrical hum, standard in industrial environments. But layered within that was a secondary pattern, irregular. 3 pulses. Pause. 2 pulses. 3. Pause. Repeating. It resembled coded tapping. Morse analysis yielded no clear translation. But the rhythm matched something else. Hydraulic purge cycles. Except Bay 3 logs showed no purge during that time, which meant manual override of purge valve. Manual purge required 2-person operation for safety compliance. 2 people present. Rachel scheduled a 3rd round of interviews. This time separately, simultaneously. Harold Ives began to sweat within minutes when presented with the tape fragment and particulate analysis. Victor Hale maintained composure until shown his phone's canal proximity. Neither confessed. But inconsistencies multiplied. Rachel then discovered an overlooked detail. The metallic impact at second 12 of the 911 call had harmonic overtones consistent with hollow pipe contact, not solid press surface. Bay 3 stored spare steel conduit behind the hydraulic units. If someone fell into that rack, impact resonance would match. She requested forensic recreation. Engineers simulated pipe collision under similar acoustic conditions. The waveform aligned with an 87% similarity, meaning Daniel likely struck the conduit during struggle. The breathing in seconds 14 to 16 grew more erratic under enhancement, and at second 15, nearly inaudible, a word fragment emerged. Not clear, but possibly, don't. If that interpretation holds, then Daniel was conscious. And someone else was present. The case file now reflected probable violent altercation inside Bay 3 between 9:37 and 9:42 p.m. The question shifted from whether a crime occurred to where the body went. Plant schematics revealed a rarely used drainage channel beneath the press floor, designed for coolant runoff. Channel width 22 inches, depth 18 inches. Connected to external waste filtration system emptied weekly. Records showed the filtration tank was serviced Friday morning, less than 12 hours after Daniel vanished. Contents were discarded at municipal waste processing. Rachel froze that record. If biological material entered that channel, it could have been transported beyond the plant before investigators even classified the case as suspicious. She ordered waste facility retrieval logs. But the delay, 3 weeks, meant evidence degradation likely extensive. Still, she pursued it. Because 17 seconds rarely lie, and staged fires rarely erase everything. By the time Detective Rachel Monroe arrived at the municipal waste processing facility, 24 days had passed since Daniel Mercer vanished. Organic matter does not wait for investigators. The filtration tank from Bay 3 had been emptied Friday morning at 7:10 a.m. Less than 10 hours after the 911 call, its contents were transported with routine industrial wasty coolant slurry, metal particulates, cleaning solvents, and any residual runoff collected through the press floor drainage system. If biological material entered that channel during or after a violent altercation, it would have traveled through that system. The plant's drainage schematic showed a sloped stainless trench beneath Bay 3's graded floor, designed for hydraulic fluid overflow, not for concealment. The trench fed into a sealed filtration drum before being pumped into an external holding tank. Rachel requested maintenance logs for that system. Last internal inspection 6 weeks before Daniel disappeared. Next scheduled inspection 2 weeks after, meaning no one officially opened the trench during the relevant window. But official records had already proven unreliable. Roland reconstructed the physical dimensions. Channel width 22 inches, depth 18 inches, length across Bay 30 14 feet. Not large enough to hide a body intact. Large enough to conceal blood. Large enough to transport tissue. Crime scene techs reopened Bay 3 under warrant. Grates were lifted. Underneath, dried coolant residue coated the trench walls. Blue, tinted fluid consistent with plant inventory. Rachel ordered full luminal application despite the delay. Under chemical reaction, faint fluorescence appeared along the trench's midpoint. Uneven streaking inconsistent with standard runoff patterns. The fluorescence pooled near the drain intake valve. Someone had flushed something. The filtration drum retrieved from municipal storage showed heavy contamination from metal shavings, as expected. But inside the residue, forensic analysts isolated degraded human epithelial cells. DNA yield partial, enough for probabilistic match. Results returned 72 hours later. Partial profile consistent with Daniel Mercer. Not conclusive, but statistically significant. The case formally shifted from missing person to homicide investigation. But homicide without remains complicates prosecution. Rachel needed mechanism, needed sequence, needed to answer the unspoken question: how does a man disappear inside a functioning industrial facility without triggering alarms? She re-examined plant layout. Bay 3 was not isolated. Adjacent to it was storage corridor C, used for raw sheet metal intake. That corridor connected to loading dock 2, which exited onto the East Service Road. Dock 2 camera footage from that night showed nothing unusual, except at 9:48 p.m., 6 minutes after the 911 call. A forklift exited briefly, then re-entered. Operator ID was logged under shared credentials, meaning the forklift was activated, but no individual user identified. Forklift GPS tracking indicated traveled from Bay 3 to Dock 2 and back within 4 minutes. Rachel requested forklift seat swabs. Though weeks had passed, trace biological material sometimes survives in foam cushioning. Results: negative for blood. But fibers recovered from under the seat included dark cotton threads consistent with Daniel's work jacket. His jacket had never been recovered. Clara confirmed he wore it that night. Rachel reconstructed the likely window 9:37 p.m. Camera blackout. Between 9:37 to 9:42, altercation occurs. 9:42, 911 call triggered. 9:43, phone powered down. 9:44, there's movement log. 905, unknown activity window before plant night shift check in rounds. She interviewed night shift floor worker Marcus Lynn, who reported hearing a loud bang around 9:40 p.m., but assumed it was routine press noise. He also reported smelling something metallic later, but attributed it to machining. Metallic scent is often described in blood-heavy environments. Marcus was not initially interviewed during first response. Oversight. Rachel asked him why. He said no one asked detailed questions at first. The assumption was that Daniel left the plant alive. Assumptions reduce evidence collection. Rachel pulled Daniel's access card swipe history. After 9:16 p.m., no additional door activity under his badge. But interior movement does not require badge. She examined emergency exit alarms. No triggers that night, which narrowed exit routes to monitor docks. Dock 2 forklift log was now central. Victor Hale's maintenance role included forklift certification. Harold Ives was not certified. Rachel cross-checked Victor's phone step count data. At 9:50 p.m., his phone recorded 312 steps within a 5-minute window. Consistent with moderate physical exertion. Victor claimed he was already home. Cell tower data placed his phone near the plant until 10:02 p.m. When confronted again, Victor adjusted his timeline. He now claimed Daniel had asked for help with something personal. That night, he refused to elaborate. Rachel asked if that personal matter involved Daniel's compliance complaint. Victor paused, then denied knowledge of any complaint. Plant HR confirmed Victor was copied on internal resolution email 3 weeks earlier. False statement recorded. Meanwhile, forensic audio specialists completed deeper spectral enhancement of the 911 call. They isolated background layers previously dismissed as interference. At second 14.3, beneath the breathing, there was a second voice. Low, male, single syllable. Possibly, stop. Or possibly, drop. Phonetic ambiguity remains. Rachel brought both Victor and Harold in separately and played the enhanced clip. Harold showed minimal reaction. Victor's jaw tightened at second 12. The metallic impact. Micro-expression analysis suggested recognition. Rachel did not accuse. She shifted strategy. Instead of focusing on Daniel, she introduced financial audit findings. Plant procurement records revealed unauthorized purchase of aftermarket hydraulic valve restrictors 2 months prior. Installation undocumented. Those restrictors altered press force calibration. Daniel's compliance complaint referenced unlogged calibration deviation. If restrictors were installed improperly, press force could exceed safety tolerance. If Daniel discovered this, confrontation likely. Rachel hypothesized a scenario: Daniel confronts Harold about undocumented modifications. Victor present for maintenance. Argument escalates. Physical struggle. Daniel injured. Panic. Camera blackout engaged. Body removed using forklift. Runoff flushed through trench. SUV staged to simulate off-site crime, but still missing body disposal location. Forklift GPS path showed travel only to Dock 2 and back. Dock 2 exit gate logs showed no truck departure during that specific 4-minute window, meaning if body exited, it did so concealed within another object. Rachel examined outbound shipment logs for that night. At 10:15 p.m., a sealed scrap metal container departed via contracted hauler. Container weight 180.42 pounds. Within normal variance. Scrap containers often contain irregular loads. Weight alone inconclusive. But the container had not been flagged during initial investigation. It had already been processed and recycled. Rachel requested scrap facility intake logs. Facility confirmed container was shredded within 48 hours. High-heat industrial shredders leave little retrievable material. If remains were concealed inside scrap load, recovery now improbable. This was the moment the case risked becoming theoretical. Without remains, defense could argue accident, contamination, coincidence. Rachel returned to Bay 3 alone after hours. Industrial spaces feel different when silent. She stood where Daniel likely stood, measured sight lines. Distance from press to conduit rack 6 feet. Distance from conduit rack to trench grate 3 feet. If someone were struck or pushed into conduit, impact noise matches recording. If subsequent blow incapacitated him, blood loss could begin immediately. But the blood volume recovered in trench suggested significant injury, not instantaneous death, meaning Daniel may have been alive when placed on forklift, which recontextualized the 17-second call. Perhaps it was not accidental. Perhaps Daniel dialed intentionally during struggle. Phone found. No. Device never recovered. If Victor or Harold destroyed it, location unknown. But cell provider logs confirmed the phone connected to plant tower sector only once that night. No subsequent pings anywhere else. Which means, if phone left plant, it was powered down or destroyed immediately. Rachel requested landfill search authorization for municipal waste from Friday morning. Probability of meaningful recovery after 3 weeks low, but not zero. Meanwhile, Clara Mercer attended every procedural hearing. She asked one question repeatedly. Is he still out there somewhere? Rachel did not answer emotionally. She answered structurally. We are reconstructing. Because hope without evidence can distort truth. Autopsy impossible. But cause of death inference possible through pattern. Blood degradation in trench indicated volume approximating 1.2 to 1.6 liters minimum before dilution. Not instantly fatal, but dangerous. Metal shavings embedded in epithelial samples suggested contact with industrial surfaces during bleeding. Rachel then uncovered a final anomaly. At 9:41 p.m., 1 minute before the 911 call, internal plant messaging system recorded a draft message under Daniel's login. The message was never sent, recovered through IT server backup. Draft content, Harold, if this isn't fixed tonight, I'm filing external. Timestamp 9:412 p.m., meaning Daniel was alive and typing less than a minute before the emergency call. Which narrows violence window further. Something changed between 9:41 and 9:42 while in 3 p.m. 51 seconds. In 51 seconds, confrontation became crisis. Rachel reviewed plant emergency lighting logs. At 9:40 p.m., circuit fluctuation recorded in Bay 3 minor voltage dip, manual switch activation possible. Someone may have cut lights briefly. Camera blackout, lighting dip, argument impact. Sequence tightening. But one element still resisted alignment. The rear passenger window of the SUV shattered outward. If vehicle was staged after Daniel's removal, why shatter window from inside? Unless someone else was inside when fire was set. Or unless the break occurred before ignition. Rachel ordered glass fragment trajectory reanalysis. New findings indicated window break preceded fire by at least 15 minutes. Meaning the SUV was damaged before accelerant applied, which suggests the vehicle may have been part of altercation before being burned. Did Daniel reach his SUV after leaving plant? Or was SUV brought to plant before disposal? License plate reader data showed Daniel's SUV leaving plant parking lot at 10:08 p.m., captured on city traffic camera 2 miles west of facility. Driver identity not visible, meaning someone drove the SUV away from plant, likely not Daniel. Timeline now extends beyond Bay 3. which shifts focus to post-plant movement. Victor Hale's phone at 10:07 p.m. Pinged tower sector overlapping that same roadway. Two devices moving in proximity. Rachel now had synchronized movement data. SUV leaves plant at 10:08 p.m. Victor's phone traveling similar direction at 7:12 p.m. Canal site located west of that route. The burn site was not random. It lay along Victor's probable travel path home. The evidence was converging not as fragments, but as pattern. 17 seconds. 42 seconds. 51 seconds. Industrial violence does not always leave bodies, but it leaves systems, and systems record behavior. The irrigation canal was never meant to hold secrets. It was a controlled artery, diverting agricultural runoff through concrete channels that cut across the west side of Caldwell County. Shallow in most areas, slow-moving, maintained monthly by the Water Authority. On Saturday morning at 6:12 a.m., a cyclist reported smoke rising from a dirt turnout along the canal's access road. By the time fire crews arrived, Daniel Mercer's SUV was fully engulfed. Initial responders treated it as an abandoned vehicle fire. Only after Clara Mercer filed the missing person report did the license plate connect to a broader timeline. Detective Rachel Monroe stood at the burn site 28 days later, reviewing soil core samples extracted from 3 radial points around where the SUV had rested. Accelerant traces, gasoline, were confirmed along a 1.8-meter radius from the rear passenger side. But the soil told a secondary story. Under the burn layer, analysts detected compressed substrate consistent with weight, bearing depression from a second vehicle parked parallel for several minutes. Not a brief stop, long enough for offloading activity. Rachel requested depth pressure modeling. Based on soil density and tire impression patterns, the second vehicle likely weighed between 4,000 and 5,000 pounds, consistent with a mid-size pickup. Victor Hale's truck fell within that range, but soil analysis revealed something more precise. Embedded in the compressed soil were microscopic flakes of silver automotive paint not matching Daniel's SUV. Laboratory comparison linked the flakes to 2014-2016 Silverline series pickup finishes. Victor owned a 2015 Silverline. Correlation is not conviction, but convergence matters. Rachel reconstructed the likely canal sequence, 10:08 p.m. SUV departs plant, 10:30 p.m. SUV and pickup arrive canal turnout. Window break occurs. SUV later ignited. Victor leaves scene before dawn to avoid detection. Phone ping at 5:41 a.m. But why return at dawn? Fire forensics answered that. Accelerant evaporation rates suggested gasoline was applied earlier, possibly around 1100 p.m. But ignition occurred closer to 5:30 a.m. Delayed ignition implies caution, meaning SUV may have sat unburned for several hours, which implies the perpetrators feared earlier smoke visibility. Rachel reviewed thermal satellite data from regional weather archives. At approximately 5:28 a.m., localized heat spike detected near canal coordinates, matching ignition estimate. Victor's 5:41 a.m. phone ping aligned with post-ignition departure window. But ignition timing introduced new complexity. If Daniel's body was already removed from plant earlier, what happened between 10:30 p.m. and 5:30 a.m.? Rachel expanded the search radius around the canal. Ground, penetrating radar deployed along 300-meter stretch. Multiple anomalies detected, mostly irrigation pipe repairs. One anomaly registered at 1.4 meters depth, 22 meters north of burn site. Excavation authorized. What was recovered was not a body. It was a tarp fragment. Blue polyethylene. Industrial grade. Same color as plant trench lining. Chemical composition matched batch inventory shipped to the fabrication plant 8 months earlier. The tarp fragment contained degraded organic staining. DNA analysis yielded insufficient profile for identification, but luminal reaction confirmed prior presence of blood, meaning something wrapped in that tarp had contact with blood before burial attempt. Yet no remains were found in the soil cavity. Depth suggested shallow concealment initially, later disturbed. Soil stratification indicated secondary displacement. In simple terms, something was buried and later removed. Rachel studied rainfall records. Light rainfall occurred Sunday afternoon, after fire, meaning any burial before Sunday would show distinct layering. The anomaly cavity suggested disturbance twice, which implied the canal site was not final disposal location. It was staging ground. Rachel turned back to Victor Hale's truck, this time not for luminal, For undercarriage trace. Microscopic soil comparison linked sediment trapped in truck's axle housing to canal soil composition. Mixture of clay, silt unique to that irrigation zone. Victor's explanation. I fish there sometimes. Fishing license records showed no renewal for 3 years. Moreover, his truck's onboard navigation history, extracted via warrant, showed canal coordinates, entered manually at 10:17 p.m. Thursday night. That entry was deleted. But deletion logs remain. Rachel confronted Victor with the navigation artifact. He denied entering coordinates. Blamed system glitch. She then introduced the tarp fragment. Victor requested a lawyer. Interview terminated. Parallel interrogation of Harold Ives produced a shift in tone. Harold admitted to disabling the Bay 3 camera to avoid documenting an argument. He claimed Daniel became aggressive over compliance accusations. Harold insisted Daniel slipped and struck his head accidentally on conduit rack. He denied intentional violence. He claimed panic led him to call Victor for help. He admitted to flushing blood through trench to void plant shutdown. He denied knowing what Victor did afterward. Harold's admission reframed the case. From planned homicide to negligent concealment. But forensic evidence did not support simple slip and fall. Impact pattern in audio indicated forceful collision, not single fall. Blood volume exceeded typical head laceration unless compounded by additional trauma. Rachel asked Harold directly, "Was Daniel breathing when you put him on the forklift?" Harold did not answer immediately. He said, "He wasn't moving." Non-answer, which implies uncertainty. If Daniel was alive when removed, failure to render aid escalates liability dramatically. Rachel reviewed forklift fork tine height logs. Yes, forklift's record hydraulic position changes. At 9:49 p.m., fork elevation rose to 48 inches, higher than typical scrap movement inside Bay 3. At 9:50 p.m., sudden drop recorded. If body was placed on forks and transported, elevation patterns align. Forklift path ended at Dock 2. Dock 2 exit gate did not open, meaning body did not leave plant in plain sight. Rachel examined loading dock floor drains. Trace luminol reactions faint but present near Dock 2 threshold. Possibility transfer to secondary container. She cross-checked outbound shipments again. In addition to scrap container at 10:15 p.m., there was one refrigerated parts shipment leaving at 11:02 p.m. destination subcontractor 38 miles north. Shipment manifest listed sealed crates of machined aluminum components. Rachel requested crate inspection photos from receiving subcontractor. One crate exhibited interior cleaning anomalies, bleach residue inconsistent with standard packing. But crate had been emptied and reused. Time gap too large for recovery. However, shipping driver logs showed unexpected stop at rest area 12 miles from canal at 11:48 p.m. Driver claimed bathroom break. Rest area security footage showed no anomalies, just truck idling for 9 minutes. But no footage of cargo interior. Rachel noted something else. Victor's phone movement between 10:30 p.m. and midnight showed travel not directly home, but looping path that intersected that rest area corridor. 2 vehicles moving in same arc. Coordinated. Rachel mapped movement overlays. Plant dock canal rest area, divergent routes, which implies potential transfer at rest area. If body initially staged at canal, then relocated to different vehicle, that explains disturbed soil cavity and tarp fragment. Rachel requested regional traffic camera review near rest area. At 11:52 p.m., footage captured two vehicles parked in tandem briefly on service shoulder adjacent to truck lot. One matching Silverline pickup, one matching plant contractor box truck. They remained stationary 4 minutes, then separated. Driver identification unclear, but timestamp matched phone geolocation clustering. Sequence hypothesis evolving 1. Daniel injured during confrontation. 2. Harold and Victor remove him via forklift. 3. Body transported in Victor's pickup to canal. 4. Temporary burial attempt using plant tarp. 5. Decision made to relocate body to more permanent disposal. 6. Transfer at rest area to outgoing shipment vehicle. 7. Sevi later burned to stage independent crime. If correct, remains may not be near canal, may be far beyond county. Rachel expanded search to contractor shipment routes. The refrigerated shipment delivered aluminum parts to subcontractor facility north, but subcontractor forwarded material 2 days later to secondary manufacturer out of state. Chain length complicates recovery. Rachel subpoenaed GPS logs from contractor's fleet. One box truck deviated 3.4 miles off scheduled road at 12 miles and 7 a.m. Deviation location: rural gravel pit temporarily inactive for winter. Gravel pits are common clandestine disposal sites. Rachel secured excavation warrant. Excavation at gravel pit revealed disturbed earth approximately 1.6 meters deep near northern berm, at depth blue polyethylene fibers. And beneath that, odor. Human decomposition distinct even after weeks. Remains recovered in advanced state. Dental records confirmed identity: Daniel Mercer. Autopsy revealed blunt force trauma to occipital region consistent with heavy cylindrical object. Additional rib fractures suggesting compressive force. Cause of death: combination of cranial injury and hemorrhagic shock. Time of death estimated between 9:45 and 10:30 p.m. Meaning Daniel was likely alive during initial removal from Bay 3 and likely alive when loaded into Victor's truck. Failure to seek medical aid transformed concealment into homicide. But one unresolved question persisted. Rear passenger window shattered outward before ignition. Autopsy revealed abrasions on Daniel's forearms consistent with glass contact, which means he regained consciousness at some point inside SUV. He tried to escape. Window broke. But why no blood on window frame? Because by then, significant blood loss had already occurred earlier. Bleeding slowed. Weak attempt. Someone stopped him, which aligns with faint word on the 911 call. Don't. The recovery of Daniel Mercer's body shifted the investigation from reconstruction to attribution. Blunt force trauma to be occipital bone. Linear fracture radiating forward. Subdural hemorrhage consistent with high impact strike. Additional rib fractures. Anterolateral compression. Defensive abrasions on forearms. Glass microfragments embedded in sleeve fibers. The autopsy timeline placed primary injury within minutes of the 9:42 p.m. 911 call, which meant Daniel was struck during the confrontation in Bay 3. But the pattern of cranial fracture did not match simple collision with conduit rack alone. Forensic pathologist Dr. Elena Kovacs measured the curvature and impact surface characteristics. The fracture lines suggested a rounded cylindrical object approximately 3-4 inches in diameter. Industrial hydraulic pipes in Bay 3 matched that profile. But so did handheld steel conduit sections stored beside the press. Rachel returned to Bay 3 with a laser trajectory kit. She reconstructed Daniel's likely position based on blood fluorescence patterns along the trench midpoint. Droplet angle suggested he was upright when initial bleeding began. If he had simply slipped and struck the rack, blood pooling would concentrate near impact zone. Instead, droplet dispersion indicated movement after initial strike, which implies at least one additional blow or forceful push. Harold Ives had admitted to a confrontation. He had not admitted to striking Daniel intentionally. Victor Hale had invoked counsel and remained silent. Rachel needed fracture to object alignment. She requested inventory of loose conduit pipes in Bay 3. One pipe, 1.5 meters in length, was missing from rack position documented in prior safety audit photographs. No record of removal, no scrap tag, unaccounted. She then ordered magnetic sweep beneath the press platform. Metal shavings are abundant in such environments, but among them, a faint reddish, brown stain adhered to underside support beam, protected from cleaning. Presumptive test positive for blood. DNA degraded beyond full profile, but partial markers aligned probabilistically with Daniel, meaning at least one blow occurred above that location. Rachel reviewed Harold's physical capability. Age 53. Hypertension. Moderate build. Victor Hale, 39. Physically fit. Former high school linebacker. Autopsy report indicated strike force sufficient to cause immediate neurological disorientation but not instant death. Secondary rib fractures likely occurred during compression, possibly during handling or restraint. Rachel reanalyzed the enhanced 911 call again, this time focusing not on Daniel's voice but on ambient resonance after the metallic impact. At second 12.6, a reverberation decay curve suggested the impacting object was not fixed structure, but free, moving metal, meaning Daniel likely struck a loose pipe, not bolted conduit rack, which weakens Harold's slip narrative. Additionally, the cadence of breathing in seconds 13 to 16 becomes more labored after the metallic impact, meaning he was conscious briefly. At second 14.8, faint scuffling is audible, which suggests movement continued after initial blow. Rachel reconstructed scenario. Daniel confronts Harold over compliance violations. Argument escalates. Victor enters. Physical altercation ensues. Daniel pushed or struck. He collides with loose pipe. Falls. Victor picks up same pipe and delivers second strike. This would explain cranial fracture shape and blood distribution. But reconstruction requires corroboration. Rachel subpoenaed plant internal messaging logs again. 2 days before disappearance, Victor sent Harold a private message. If he files external, we're done. Harold replied, handle it. In ambiguous language. Potentially incriminating. Defense would argue, handle it. Meant address complaint administratively. Context matters. Rachel confronted Harold again, this time presenting the recovered body findings. She described rib fractures. She described cranial fracture depth. She described the missed opportunity for medical intervention. Harold's composure fractured. He insisted Daniel was already gone when they moved him. Rachel presented autopsy lividity patterns showing body was repositioned at least twice before burial. She stated, Hay was alive when he left Bay 3 Point. Harold's breathing changed. Silence extended 19 seconds. Then he said, I didn't hit him. Not. Nobody. Specifically, I. Which narrows focus. Rachel shifted to Victor. Prosecutor approved limited immunity negotiation for truthful cooperation excluding primary assault. Victor initially refused, but when presented with GPS deviation at gravel pit and fiber match between tarp fragment and truck bed liner, his attorney recalculated risk. Victor agreed to proffer session. He stated Daniel confronted Harold aggressively. Harold shoved him. Daniel swung first. Victor intervened. Daniel fell into conduit rack, hit head, started bleeding, tried to stand, grabbed pipe. Victor claims he took pipe away and may have struck him while pulling it. Language minimizing intent. Victor admitted to moving Daniel with forklift because Harold feared plant shutdown. He admitted to placing Daniel in pickup. He claimed Daniel was unconscious but breathing shallowly. Victor stated, I thought he was dead by the time we reached the canal. Rachel asked why bury him. Victor said panic. Why relocate body from canal to gravel pit? Victor said news of missing person report frightened Harold, who feared canal would be searched. Victor admitted to breaking SUV window when Daniel moved in back seat. This aligns with glass fragments in Daniel's sleeves, meaning Daniel regained consciousness during transport. Victor claims Harold told him, if he wakes up, it's over. Victor insists he did not strike Daniel again after canal. Autopsy did not show additional cranial trauma beyond initial injury, meaning Daniel likely succumbed to hemorrhagic shock and lack of medical treatment. Legal distinction now becomes critical. Intentional homicide versus reckless indifference resulting in death. Prosecutor strategy shifted towards second-degree murder with aggravating concealment factors. But Rachel was not finished. Because something's still misaligned. Victor's timeline places second strike as accidental during pipe removal. Yet cranial fracture pattern showed clean linear depression, consistent with deliberate downward swing. Additionally, rib fractures indicated compressive force, possibly from kneeling restraint. Rachel revisited plant acoustic logs from seconds after 9/11 call. At second 16.2, just before disconnect, there is a dull thud distinct from metallic impact earlier. Engineers classified it as soft body collision against floor, which could represent Daniel collapsing after second strike. If second strike occurred before call disconnected, then Victor's claim of accidental blow after fall becomes suspect. Rachel mapped acoustic sequence impact 1T metallic hollow resonance. Scuffle. Possible verbal. Don't. Impact 2T softer thud, meaning 2 impacts within 17 seconds. Victor's statement accounted for only 1 significant strike. Rachel confronted him with dual impact analysis. He hesitated, then said, wouldn't stop, which shifts narrative from accident to escalation. Rachel asked, who delivered the second strike? Victor stared at table, said nothing. Harold, under separate interrogation, maintained he never touched pipe. Cross-interview inconsistency widened. Prosecutor authorized forensic biomechanics consultation. Biomechanical expert concluded given height differences between Victor 66.1 and Daniel 75.9, downward strike angle producing occipital fracture more consistent with taller assailant standing behind victim. Harold stood 5'8". Victor's height aligns. Additionally, pipe grip residue analysis found trace skin cells. Though degraded, mitochondrial DNA consistent with Victor's maternal lineage markers. Not conclusive, but supportive. Rachel prepared final interrogation. She presented mitochondrial trace alignment, biomechanical strike angle analysis, dual impact acoustic evidence, text message, handle it. GPS deviation to gravel pit. The glass abrasion on Daniel's arms indicating attempted escape. She did not accuse. She asked, "When he said don't, what did you think he meant?" Victor's breathing shifted. Eyes reddened. Voice lowered. He was going to file external. Rachel replied, "No." In that moment, silence. Then, he said, "Don't hit me again." The word, again, entered record, which confirms 2 strikes. Intent escalated. Victor admitted second strike was deliberate. He claimed fear, not malice. Fear of job loss. Fear of legal consequences. Fear of Harold's pressure. But fear does not negate action. Rachel's final reconstruction 9:40 12 p.m. Daniel drafts external complaint warning 9:42 p.m. Confrontation escalates. Strike 1. Daniel collides with pipe. Strike 2. Victor delivers deliberate blow. 911 call remains open during struggle. Daniel collapses. Forklift transport. No medical aid. Canal staging. SUV window break during partial consciousness. Body relocated. Fire staged at dawn. 17 seconds recorded enough truth to dismantle a cover story. Confession is not conviction. Victor Hale's proffer session provided narrative alignment, but prosecutors required corroboration strong enough to withstand defense reconstruction. Industrial homicide cases rarely hinge on emotion. They hinge on process. Assistant District Attorney Miriam Cole structured the charges carefully. Count 1 second-degree murder. Intentional act resulting in death without premeditation. Count 2 tampering with evidence. Count 3 abuse of a corpse. Count 4 conspiracy. Harold Ives faced conspiracy, evidence tampering, and obstruction. His liability centered not on the strike, but on decisions made after. But the prosecution's strategy extended beyond individuals, because Daniel Mercer's compliance complaint was no longer peripheral. It was motive. 3 weeks before his death, Daniel documented hydraulic pressure irregularities in Bay 3. He alleged undocumented installation of valve restrictors, altering press force calibration. Rachel obtained internal engineering documentation from corporate headquarters. The restrictors increased output efficiency by 11%. They also increased mechanical stress on aging press components, exceeding manufacturer tolerance by measurable margin. Corporate emails revealed plant leadership had been under performance pressure to meet quarterly production quotas. Harold Ives had authorized restrictor installation. Victor Hale performed physical modification. No external safety audit was notified. Daniel's complaint threatened exposure. In deposition, corporate counsel argued Daniel's concern was procedural overreach. Rachel countered with OSHA correspondence. If Daniel filed external, regulatory inspection would have followed. Fines, shutdown, liability. Victor's text, "If he files external, we're done," becomes contextual motive, not stray frustration. Defense pivoted toward alternative theory. They argued Daniel initiated physical confrontation, that Victor's strike was defensive, that Daniel's death resulted from tragic accident compounded by panic. Rachel anticipated this. She introduced biomechanical modeling showing Daniel's occipital fracture required force beyond reactive deflection. She introduced acoustic sequencing indicating 2 distinct impacts. She introduced forklift hydraulic logs showing Daniel was moved while likely still alive. But prosecution faced a vulnerability. There was no direct eyewitness independent of defendants. No video during blackout. No complete DNA on pipe, which means jury persuasion would rely on convergence. Rowland's reconstruction for the court followed discipline chronology. 9:37 p.m. Camera blackout initiated manually by Harold Ives. 9:41 p.m. Daniel drafts escalation warning. 9:42 p.m. 911 call placed during altercation. Within seconds. Dual impacts captured on recording. 9:48 p.m. Forklift activated. Tundo 8 p.m. SUV leaves plant. Tunner 10:30 p.m. Canal staging. 11:52 p.m. Rest area transfer. 12:07 a.m. Gravel pit deviation. 5:28 a.m. SUV ignition. 17 seconds opened the door. Digital systems filled the room. The defense challenged the acoustic analysis. They hired independent audio expert who argued environmental distortion could misrepresent number of impacts. Prosecution countered with spectral layering comparison across 14 industrial control recordings taken from Bay 3 simulations. Impact signatures remained distinct. Judge ruled acoustic evidence admissible. Meanwhile, civil attorneys representing Clara Mercer filed wrongful death suit against corporate entity. Discovery unearthed performance incentive bonuses tied directly to production output exceeding safety calibration thresholds. Harold Ives had received performance bonus 2 weeks before Daniel disappeared. Victor Hale had received overtime approval tied to restrictor installation work. Financial incentive intertwined with safety violation. Rachel met with Clara before preliminary hearing. Clara asked again, was he in pain? Rachel answered precisely. He likely lost consciousness quickly after the second impact. It was the closest approximation science allowed. The preliminary hearing introduced another variable. Plant IT administrator testified that manual camera blackout required supervisor-level credentials and physical presence at maintenance terminal. Terminal logs confirmed Harold initiated blackout at 9:36:58 p.m., which means blackout occurred before confrontation peaked. Premeditation window small, but existent. Defense argued blackout routine for firmware updates. Prosecution presented IT scheduling logs disproving any planned update. Intent to conceal documented before violence escalated. That strengthens conspiracy narrative. Victor's attorney negotiated plea possibility in exchange for testimony against Harold. Victor agreed to testify that Harold ordered concealment and pressured second strike. But Rachel remained cautious. Victor's evolving narrative risked appearing opportunistic. Consistency matters to juries. Prosecutor decided to proceed with joint trial, but maintain ability to sever if testimony diverged. During arraignment, Harold's demeanor remained rigid. He denied encouraging violence. He admitted poor judgment post-incident. But then financial audit uncovered deleted email from Harold to regional managers sent 1 day after Daniel's disappearance. Compliance issue resolved. Timestamp Friday 2:13 p.m. meaning Harold declared issue closed less than 24 hours after Daniel vanished. This email, when shown to jury, reframes consciousness of guilt. Rachel revisited Daniel's drafted unsent message. Harold, if this isn't fixed tonight, I'm filing external. The phrase tonight becomes critical. It implies immediate escalation, which may have precipitated immediate confrontation. Prosecution argued that Daniel's integrity threatened financial and professional stability of 2 men. Defense countered that corporate pressure, not malice, created panic spiral. Courtroom narrative diverged into 2 competing moral frames. Frame A: 2 men silenced a whistleblower. Frame B: teen. A workplace argument tragically spiraled out of control. Rachel's testimony focused strictly on evidence. No adjectives, no speculation. She described trench fluorescence, forklift elevation logs, soil compression modeling, navigation deletion artifacts, acoustic dual impact pattern, glass abrasion correlation. She did not say, cover up. She said, sequence. Juries respond to sequence. Mid-trial, prosecution introduced a final piece. Planned emergency lighting voltage dip at 9:40 p.m. Engineering expert testified manual switch interruption likely intentional to reduce visibility during confrontation. This suggests pre-violence preparation. Harold's counsel objected. Judge allowed limited admission. Victor, on stand, admitted. Harold said if cameras see this, we're both done. Meaning blackout was protective, not procedural. When asked who delivered second strike, Victor answered, I did. He claimed he panicked. He claimed he feared Daniel would report them both. Prosecutor asked. When he said, don't, what did you think he meant? Victor replied, he meant don't hit him again. Courtroom silence followed. That line echoes 17-second recording. Defense attempted to reframe Daniel's actions as aggressive, but autopsy revealed no defensive injuries on Victor or Harold. No bruising, no lacerations. No evidence of sustained attack from Daniel, which weakens self-defense argument. Closing arguments emphasize duty of care. Even if initial strike accidental, failure to seek aid constitutes depraved indifference when medical intervention could have saved life. Medical expert testified that with rapid trauma response, Daniel's survival probability was above 60%, which means concealment, not injury alone, caused death. Verdict returned after 6 hours deliberation. Victor Hale guilty. Second-degree murder. Guilty. Tampering with evidence. Guilty. Abuse of corpse. Harold Ives guilty. Conspiracy. Guilty. Tampering. Guilty. Obstruction. Not guilty. Murder. Corporate civil case settled confidentially months later. But Rachel's work did not end at conviction, because the 17-second call remained archived, and she revisited it one final time alone. In the background, beneath impact and breathing, there was a faint third tonal anomaly at second 3.8 previously dismissed as interference. It matched a frequency band inconsistent with Bay 3 machinery. It matched emergency exit door alarm tone muted mid-cycle, which suggests someone tested or triggered exit mechanism before altercation, meaning blackout and voltage dip may have been coordinated steps, not spontaneous reaction. Premeditation window perhaps larger than argued. But criminal trial concluded. Double jeopardy applies. Further charge unlikely. Rachel filed supplemental memo noting anomaly, not for prosecution, for record integrity. Because patterns matter. 17 seconds initiated justice, but it also hinted that intent may have formed earlier than confession admitted. Convictions create closure for courts. They do not always create closure for investigators. 2 weeks after sentencing, Detective Rachel Monroe reopened the archived audio file from Daniel Mercer's 9/11 call, not as evidence for trial, but as a technical anomaly requiring classification. 17 seconds. It had already secured justice, but Rachel had learned over years in major crimes that short recordings sometimes contain longer truths. At second 3.8, before the metallic impact, before the escalation, there is a brief tonal spike at 2.1 kHz layered above the baseline electrical hum. It lasts 0.4 seconds. During trial, it was dismissed as machinery interference. But Rachel compared the spike against a database of industrial sound signatures collected from previous cases. The waveform matched the muted pre-alarm chirp used in several commercial emergency exit delay systems, specifically models installed in facilities with controlled access bays. Bay 3 was not supposed to have such a system. Plant schematics did not list exit delay alarms near that zone. But Dock 2 did. Dock 2 was equipped with a 5-second pre-alarm chirp before magnetic release disengaged. The chirp could be manually silenced at maintenance terminal, meaning someone could test or prime the exit before moving large objects without triggering full audible alarm. If that chirp occurred at second 3.8 of the 911 call, it suggests the Dock 2 exit was accessed or prepared before violence peaked, which shifts timeline again. Instead of blackout reacting to confrontation, blackout may have preceded it. Sequence reevaluated 9:36 and 58 p.m. Camera blackout initiated 9:37 to 9:40 p.m. Potential Dock 2 system test 9:04 p.m. Daniel drafts escalation warning 9:40 p.m. 9:11 call begins. Within seconds, dual impacts 9:48 p.m. Forklift movement. Dock 2 exit likely prepared earlier. This implies readiness to move something. The question becomes what? Rachel examined plant server logs once more. 30 minutes before blackout, at 9:06 p.m., Harold accessed archived appliance files related to Daniel's complaint. At 9:12 p.m., Victor accessed internal messaging system and deleted 3 prior chat threads with Harold. Deletion logs persist. Deletion timing matters. It suggests anticipation. Rachel reviewed facility badge activity the hour before Daniel arrived. Victor badged into Bay 3 at 8:49 p.m. Outside scheduled maintenance. Harold badged into maintenance office at 8:52 p.m. Daniel arrived at 9:16 p.m., meaning Victor and Harold were already present in Bay 3 for 24 minutes before Daniel entered. Why? Defense narrative had framed argument as spontaneous escalation after Daniel confronted Harold about restrictors. But if Victor and Harold were in Bay 3 together before Daniel arrived, the meeting may not have been spontaneous. Rachel revisited Daniel's phone logs. At 8:41 p.m., Daniel received a text from Harold, "Need to talk tonight." Bay 3, which means Daniel was summoned, not incidental encounter. This text was introduced during trial, but framed as routine supervisory meeting. But when paired with pre-arrival badge entries and compliance file access, context shifts. It begins to resemble setup. Rachel assembled internal timeline board in her office, not for legal action, but for structural clarity. 8:41 p.m. Harold texts Daniel, 8:49 p.m. Victor enters Bay 3, 8:52 p.m. Harold enters maintenance office, 9:06 p.m. Harold accesses compliance complaint file, 9:12 p.m. Through the thread. Fleet spare chat threads, 9:16 p.m. Daniel arrives, 9:36 p.m. Camera blackout, 9:40 p.m. Possible Doc 2 chart, 9:40 p.m. Daniel drafts escalation message, 9:42 p.m. 9:11 call. Impacts. Removal. This sequence indicates a meeting with preparation. The law defined Victor's second strike as intentional without premeditation. But preparation elements existed. Rachel understood legal thresholds had been met. Double jeopardy prevented murder retrial against Harold. But motive structure deserved accurate classification. Because systemic patterns recur. Rachel interviewed former plant employees quietly. Post-trial. 2 technicians reported prior incidents where Harold instructed brief camera blackouts during sensitive adjustments. Neither reported injuries, but blackout as tool was normalized. Normalization of concealment increases risk. Rachel documented these statements in supplemental internal review memo, not criminal case file. Industrial culture influences individual decisions. Meanwhile, Clara Mercer pursued civil litigation discovery aggressively. Corporate depositions revealed senior management knew about restrictor installations weeks earlier and delayed audit to preserve quarterly output. Email from regional VPI. Let's not invite inspectors until Q3 numbers stabilize. This email never surfaced during criminal trial. It did not absolve Victor. It did not resurrect Daniel. But it broadened context. Rachel recognized pattern from her unresolved past case. A warehouse collapse 8 years earlier where safety violations were minimized until fatality occurred. In that case, a key witness recanted after corporate settlement. The responsible executive avoided prosecution due to insufficient direct evidence. Rachel had never resolved that outcome. Daniel's case mirrored elements: performance pressure, safety deviation, delayed oversight, violence during concealment, which is why the tonal anomaly at second 3.8 unsettled her, because if Doc 2 exit was primed before confrontation escalated, it suggests anticipation of removal. Anticipation suggests more than panic. Rachel requested internal review of plant security contractor who installed exit delay systems. Records showed Doc 2 alarm maintenance performed 3 days before Daniel's death. Technician contracted vendor employee. Rachel contacted vendor. Technician stated Harold requested adjustment to lower chirp volume because it was annoying during late shifts. Lower volume could reduce detectability during off-hours movement. This request occurred 1 week before incident. Preparation accumulates. Yet the criminal threshold for premeditated murder requires proof beyond reasonable doubt of intent to kill before act. Evidence supports intent to silence complaint. Supports readiness to conceal. Supports second deliberate strike. But proving planned killing remains complex. Rachel revisited Victor's proffer transcript. When asked why he delivered second blow, he said, "Wouldn't stop." She had interpreted that as immediate physical escalation. But what if wouldn't stop referred to filing complaint, to threatening exposure, to threatening livelihood, meaning second strike delivered not in heat of mutual combat, but to prevent escalation beyond room. That borders premeditation within seconds. Legally thin, morally distinct. Rachel filed addendum to internal homicide review board noting possible preparatory conduct preceding confrontation. No action taken. Case adjudicated. But documentation matters for pattern recognition in future compliance-linked incidents. Weeks later, OSHA launched formal audit of plant chain statewide. Restrictor installations were found at 3 additional facilities. Daniel's death triggered regulatory shift. Unintended legacy. Rachel visited the gravel pit once more alone. Industrial wind moved dust across disturbed earth now receded. She considered the 17 seconds. If Daniel had not dialed 911, accidentally or intentionally, would the acoustic record exist? Without that record, defense narrative of accidental fall may have prevailed. 17 seconds constrained fiction. The smallest artifacts often anchor the largest truths. Before closing her file, Rachel reviewed Daniel's unsent draft message again. "If this isn't fixed tonight, I'm filing external." He typed it at 9:41:12 p.m., meaning even as tension escalated, he chose process over threat. He chose procedure. And that choice precipitated violence. 8 years before Daniel Mercer dialed 911, another facility failed quietly. It was not a fabrication plant. It was a warehouse. And it did not involve hydraulic restrictors. It involved load-bearing steel. Detective Rachel Monroe had been a junior investigator then, assigned to assist on what was initially classified as an industrial accident. A distribution warehouse on the south edge of Caldwell collapsed during overnight operations. 2 workers died. 1 survived long enough to speak. The survivor said only one sentence before surgery: "They told us not to report the cracks." The statement was recorded, then minimized, then complicated by insurance negotiations and civil settlements. The warehouse executive overseeing structural maintenance resigned. No criminal charges were filed. Corporate counsel cited lack of direct evidence linking decision makers to willful negligence. Rachel remembered the case not because of its media cycle, but because of its pattern. Production pressure, ignored compliance warnings, pre-incident file access, sudden deletion of internal communications. Daniel Mercer's case had begun to resemble that earlier collapse in more than tone. After filing her supplemental memo on the Doc 2 chirp anomaly, Rachel requested archived evidence from the warehouse case. Most of it had been digitized. Some materials remained in off-site storage. She re-examined internal emails obtained during that earlier investigation. One email from the warehouse operations director read, "Let's keep this in-house until CHU numbers are secure." The language mirrored the regional VP email uncovered during Daniel's civil discovery. Corporate incentive structures shape local decisions. Rachel then compared executive rosters. The regional VP who delayed inspection in Daniel's case, Thomas Calder, had previously served as a compliance liaison at the warehouse company 8 years earlier before moving to the fabrication corporation. Overlap does not equal conspiracy, but it establishes continuity of culture. Rachel traced Calder's employment history. Warehouse collapse year: Calder served as mid-level safety consultant. No charges, no sanctions. Promotion followed within 2 years. Daniel's plant fell under Calder's regional oversight. During deposition in civil case, Calder testified he was unaware of restrictor installation specifics. But internal audit logs showed he received compliance variance reports referencing Bay 3 1 month before Daniel's death. He did not escalate. Rachel could not reopen Daniel's homicide on that basis. Victor's conviction addressed immediate violence. Harold's conspiracy conviction addressed concealment. But corporate negligence potentially extended beyond civil liability. She requested meeting with district attorney's office, not for new charges, but for pattern review across facilities. DA acknowledged complexity. Proving criminal negligence at executive level requires demonstrating conscious disregard for known fatal risk. Restrictor installation increased mechanical strain. It did not inherently mandate lethal outcome. Yet Daniel's death resulted not from machinery malfunction, but from human escalation during concealment. The line between compliance negligence and violent reaction remains legally distinct. Rachel's focus shifted from prosecution to prevention. She compiled case comparison. Warehouse collapse ignored structural warnings. Internal message deletion. Financial incentive pressure. Daniel Mercer homicide ignored hydraulic warnings. Internal message deletion. Financial incentive pressure. Violence during concealment. The connective tissue is not method, it is culture. Rowland's reconstruction for internal report emphasized sequence, not accusation. Because investigative discipline requires resisting narrative overreach. Rachel also re-examined Daniel's personal file beyond professional context. No activism. No whistleblower history. No external complaints filed prior, meaning he was not habitual disruptor. He acted when evidence warranted, which makes escalation more revealing. The 17-second recording still troubled her. She slowed playback to 0.25 speed. At second sevens, before tonal spike, there is a faint footstep pattern distinct from hydraulic cycling. 2 sets. One heavier, one lighter. It suggests at least 2 individuals in motion before impact. Victor admitted being present. Harold admitted being present. No third individual identified. But cadence suggests positioning rather than chaotic struggle, meaning confrontation may have unfolded with spatial arrangement already set. Rachel mapped Bay 3 floor plan with footstep timing intervals calculated from acoustic delay. Heavier cadence positioned closer to phone microphone. Lighter cadence slightly offset. Daniel's phone likely in his hand or pocket, which means he may have dialed before first strike, meaning he anticipated threat. That challenges defense portrayal of mutual escalation. If Daniel dialed preemptively, he sensed danger. Rachel reviewed 911 system metadata. Call initiated via manual touch input, not pocket dial algorithmic glitch. Screen unlock occurred 1.2 seconds before call placed, meaning Daniel unlocked phone deliberately, which strengthens inference of pre-impact dialing. If Daniel sensed threat before first strike, preparation may have been visible, which returns to text message. Need to talk tonight. Bay 3. Meeting summoned. Compliance file accessed beforehand. Camera blackout prepared. Exit chirp anomaly detected. Footstep positioning suggests readiness. All circumstantial. Collectively persuasive. Rachel documented these findings as comparative structural risk memo, forwarded to State Regulatory Board. Because while criminal justice concluded, systemic oversight had not. Clara Mercer declined to attend regulatory hearings. She said one trial was enough. Victor Hale was sentenced to 22 years. Harold Ives to 6 years. Corporate entity paid settlement undisclosed. Calder remained employed pending internal review. Rachel returned once more to Bay 3 months later after OSHA audit mandated upgrades. Restrictors removed. Press recalibrated. Cameras hardwired against manual blackout without multi-factor authorization. The trench beneath the grate was sealed permanently. Physical changes represent institutional memory, but memory fades, which is why Rachel archived Daniel's audio file within training curriculum for new investigators. Case study: How Minimal Data Points Reveal Maximal Truth. She titled it simply, 17 seconds. But as she prepared training notes, she noticed something else in Warehouse Collapse Archive. The surviving worker from 8 years ago, who said, "They told us not to report the cracks," had named one supervisor during initial paramedic recording. That supervisor's name was redacted in public file, but internal transcript preserved it. The name was Thomas Calder, meaning Calder's involvement in safety suppression spanned at least 2 facilities across 8 years. No criminal charge ever brought. No formal censure recorded. Rachel now faced ethical crossroad. Daniel's case was closed. Warehouse case statute of limitations expired for criminal negligence. But pattern existed. She compiled confidential memorandum recommending State Attorney General review executive level compliance culture across facilities under Calder's oversight. She did not frame it as accusation. She framed it as risk pattern analysis. Because systemic harm often manifests not as singular dramatic crime, but as repeated tolerances for concealment. The aftermath of a homicide rarely unfolds in headlines. It settles into quieter spaces. In Daniel Mercer's home, Clara removed his boots from the hallway closet 3 months after sentencing. They had remained exactly where he left them. Mud still dried along the sole from a weekend gardening project. She placed them in a box, not as surrender, but as reorganization. Grief sometimes looks like filing. Rachel did not attend the civil settlement conference. That belonged to attorneys and corporate risk analysts. But she received notice when it concluded. The fabrication company agreed to fund a statewide industrial safety reform initiative as part of the resolution. Public language framed it as commitment to operational excellence. The private ledger framed it as liability mitigation. Regulatory changes moved more slowly. OSHA conducted unannounced inspections across 7 affiliated facilities. 2 received citations for undocumented calibration adjustments. 1 supervisor resigned. None involved violence. Yet each inspection report echoed language similar to Daniel's original complaint. Unlogged deviation. Unauthorized adjustment. Deferred documentation. Patterns repeat until interrupted. Rachel's memo regarding Thomas Calder reached the Attorney General's Compliance Review Unit. They acknowledged receipt. Months passed without public action. Executive-level accountability often diffuses into internal review boards where outcomes rarely surface beyond closed-door summaries. Rachel did not expect immediate indictment. She expected documentation. Documentation accumulates weight over time. Victor Hale began serving his sentence at a medium security facility 2 counties south. During intake psychological evaluation, he described the night in Bay 3 as a blur that escalated. He claimed he thought Daniel would ruin everything. When asked what everything meant, he answered, "My job, my house, my kids' college." A fear of loss became catalyst for irreversible loss. Harold Ives filed appeal arguing insufficient evidence of conspiracy premeditation. The appellate court upheld conviction. Opinion noted, substantial circumstantial evidence of coordinated concealment. The ruling referenced the camera blackout and exit alarm anomaly specifically. The 17-second recording entered appellate jurisprudence as precedent for acoustic admissibility in industrial homicide cases. Rachel presented the case at the State Investigative Conference 6 months later. She did not focus on gore or courtroom drama. She focused on digital exhaust, the residual trail left by systems, badge logs, forklift elevation data, navigation deletion artifacts, soil compression modeling, voltage fluctuation records, draft email timestamps. She emphasized one principle: systems remember when people attempt to forget. During Q&A, a junior detective asked how she knew to re-examine the 9/11 call so deeply. Rachel answered with process, not instinct. Short recordings compress events. Compression exaggerates pattern. After the conference, she received an anonymous envelope at her office. Inside was a photocopy of an internal memo from a different facility under Calder's oversight. The memo read, "Address internally before compliance escalates." A no signature. No date. It may have been unrelated. It may have been retaliation. It may have been someone attempting to surface risk without direct exposure. Rachel logged it, because anonymous documents sometimes precede preventable tragedies. Meanwhile, Clara Mercer established a scholarship fund in Daniel's name for engineering students focused on ethical compliance systems. The first award ceremony occurred 1 year after his death. Rachel attended quietly, standing at the back of the auditorium. Clara spoke briefly. He believed procedures matter, even when inconvenient. There was no mention of violence, no mention of forklift logs, no mention of gravel pits, only procedure. The gravel pit site itself was reclaimed and filled. A small marker remained in county records but no public plaque. Industrial homicide sites rarely become memorials. Rachel returned to Bay 3 one final time before transferring supervisory oversight to a new detective. The press machines had been upgraded, the conduit rack reorganized. The maintenance terminal required dual authentication for camera override. Physical modifications reduce opportunity, but culture modification requires vigilance. She stood where Daniel had likely stood at 9:41 p.m., typing his final unsent message. "If this isn't fixed tonight, I'm filing external." He typed, "tonight," meaning he intended action within hours. That urgency triggered escalation, but urgency also preserved truth. Without that draft message, confrontation context might have remained ambiguous. The 17 seconds remained archived in training modules. Investigators from neighboring counties requested access for instructional use. Acoustic experts cited it in technical journals examining dual impact differentiation in high-noise environments. Daniel Mercer's voice was never clearly heard in the recording. Only breath. Only a possible "don't." But silence, when properly analyzed, speaks structurally. Months later, OSH published revised guidance requiring mandatory third-party verification for any calibration modification exceeding manufacturer tolerances. The memo did not mention Daniel by name. Regulatory documents rarely memorialize origin stories. Yet the change occurred after his death. Rachel closed her internal review file with a final notation. Systemic pressure plus concealment equals escalation risk. She did not classify it as corporate conspiracy. She did not label it as cultural homicide. She documented sequence. Because sequence resists denial, the irrigation canal returned to routine flow. Cyclists resumed their morning road along the dirt access road. The gravel pit accepted new shipments of aggregate. The fabrication plant continued operations under new supervision. Industries do not pause long, but records persist, and in an evidence archive labeled simply Mercer, Daniel, a 17-second file remains. Timestamp 9:42 p.m., containing impact, breath, and the smallest audible boundary between procedure and panic. Time reduces headlines to footnotes. But certain cases do not fade for the investigator who followed every timestamp. A year after Daniel Mercer's death, Detective Rachel Monroe received the Attorney General's response to her pattern memorandum. It was concise. Preliminary review indicates insufficient grounds for criminal inquiry at executive level. Monitoring recommended. Monitoring is bureaucratic language for waiting. Rachel had expected as much. Executive negligence rarely presents in the clean lines required for indictment. It disperses across departments, decisions, and performance metrics until responsibility thins beyond prosecutable density. Still, documentation remained in state archives, which means if a future incident aligns with the pattern, the prior warning exists. Rachel turned her attention inward, to the unresolved warehouse collapse from 8 years earlier. The surviving worker who had whispered, "They told us not to report the cracks," had relocated out of state. Rachel contacted him quietly. He agreed to speak off record. He described structural fissures expanding along upper truss joints weeks before collapse. Maintenance requests were submitted, delayed, then verbally discouraged. When Rachel asked who discouraged reporting, he hesitated. Calder was in meetings. He said inspections would stall expansion. No written proof. No recorded directive. Only memory. Statute of limitations on criminal negligence had expired. But civil exposure does not always expire in the same way. Rachel forwarded anonymized statement to Attorney General's compliance unit. She knew prosecution unlikely. Yet building record matters. Because repetition without intervention converts negligence into expectation. Meanwhile, within the prison system, Victor Hale requested access to the 9/11 recording for personal review through legal channels. The request was denied due to evidentiary restrictions. His attorney later conveyed Victor's message indirectly. He wanted to hear Daniel's voice. There was no clear voice to hear, only breathed, only impact, only a faint word. Rachel wondered whether Victor sought remorse or reassurance. Intent after the fact changes nothing structurally. Harold Ives began correspondence with former plant colleagues. Several letters were intercepted during routine monitoring. In one, he wrote, "It got out of hand faster than we thought." What? Even after conviction, language disperses responsibility. Clara Mercer sold the family home 18 months after sentencing. She relocated closer to her parents. During closing, she asked for one final walkthrough alone. The new owners later reported she stood in the garage for several minutes before leaving. Garages store vehicles. Vehicles carry narratives. Daniel's SUV had been reduced to ash. But space retains absence. Rachel visited the irrigation canal on the anniversary of the fire. Not ceremonially, simply observationally. She measured the tire depression depth against archived photographs. Natural erosion had nearly erased compression markers. Soil forgets faster than servers. That is why digital exhaust matters. Rachel incorporated Daniel's case into a broader analytical framework for her unit industrial confrontation escalation model. Stage 1 scene compliance tension. Stage 1 performance pressure. Stage 30 documentation threat. Stage 4A concealment preparation. Stage 50 violence during escalation. Stage 60 digital trace reconstruction. She distributed the model internally, not as academic exercise, but as early warning recognition. If investigators see Stage 4 behaviors, camera blackouts, file deletions, exit alarm adjustments, before violence, intervention becomes possible. Months later, a small fabrication facility 2 counties over-reported a near altercation after a compliance complaint. Surveillance review revealed supervisor attempting manual camera disablement. Because of Daniel's case training, internal audit intervened early. No violence occurred. Prevention rarely receives headlines. But interruption counts. Rachel's unresolved warehouse collapse remained legally closed. Yet one element resurfaced unexpectedly. An investigative journalist contacted her requesting background on both cases. The journalist had obtained whistleblower documents suggesting repeated executive-level pressure to defer safety audits across multiple facilities tied to the same oversight chain. Rachel did not disclose confidential material. She confirmed only publicly available facts. Journalistic inquiry exists outside prosecutorial constraints. Months later, a series of investigative articles detailed systemic safety suppression culture across regional manufacturing firms. While no criminal charges emerged, regulatory scrutiny intensified. Thomas Calder resigned shortly after publication, citing personal reasons. No indictment followed, but resignation alters oversight structure. Rachel documented the sequence without commentary, because outcome rarely mirrors intent directly. The 17-second recording continued to circulate within training seminars statewide. Acoustic specialists referenced it as model for layered waveform differentiation in high-noise contexts. In one seminar, a trainee asked, "Do you ever wish the call had lasted longer?" Rachel considered the question carefully. Longer calls provide more data, but they also mean longer suffering. She answered, 17 seconds were enough. Back in her office, Rachel revisited the waveform one final time before archiving the case to long-term storage. At second 0.0, the line opens. At second 3.8, the tonal spike. At second 12, the metallic resonance. At second 14.8, faint human plea. At second 16.2, secondary thud. At second 17.0, silence. 17 seconds that dismantled a constructed narrative of accident. 17 seconds that revealed two impacts. 17 seconds that mapped forklift logs, soil depressions, navigation deletions, voltage dips, and compliance emails. Industrial homicide rarely begins with violence. It begins with pressure. Pressure to perform. Pressure to conceal. Pressure to protect income over integrity. Daniel Mercer chose procedure. Others chose panic. Rachel saved the final annotated waveform under training archive tag, Mercer 900-100 final sequence. She powered down her system, not because the case lacked loose threads, but because every thread that could alter accountability had been pulled. On the second anniversary of Daniel Mercer's death, the fabrication plant in Caldwell ran at full capacity. The hydraulic presses cycled in calibrated rhythm. Sensors monitored load tolerance within manufacturer specifications. Camera overrides now required dual authentication and automatic incident logging. Exit delay alarms could no longer be muted without system-wide notification. The machinery had learned. Whether the people had was harder to measure. Detective Rachel Monroe did not attend any formal remembrance. There was no plaque outside Bay 3. No framed photograph in the administrative corridor. Industrial facilities rarely memorialize internal failures beyond policy updates. But policy updates matter. 17 seconds of recorded struggle had restructured procedures across multiple facilities. Compliance training modules now referenced the Mercer Protocol. When discussing undocumented mechanical modifications and supervisor-level override abuse, Daniel's name did not appear in the slides, yet his final action, unlocking his phone and dialing 901, remained embedded in the structure of reform. Rachel reviewed the complete investigative timeline once more before final archival seal. 8:41 p.m. Supervisor summons employee to private meeting. 8:49 p.m. Maintenance technician enters Bay 3 early. 9:06 p.m. Compliance complaint file accessed. 9:20 internal messages deleted. 9 messages deleted. 9:16 p.m. Daniel arrives. 9:58 p.m. Camera blackout. 940 p.m. Exit alarm pre-tone anomaly. 9:41 p.m. Draft escalation message typed. 9:42 p.m. 911 call initiated. 2 impacts. Breath. Plea. Silence. 9:48 p.m. Forklift elevation. 10:08 p.m. Masuvi departure. Canal staging. Rest area transfer. Gravel pit burial. 5:28 a.m. Fire ignition. A chain of decisions compressed into hours. The autopsy had established that Daniel's cranial injury alone might not have been fatal with immediate intervention. Hemorrhagic shock compounded by delay sealed the outcome. The medical examiner's language remained clinical. Survival probability significantly elevated with timely trauma response. Translation concealment killed him. Victor Hale adjusted to prison routine slowly. His sentencing report noted low prior criminal history, high employment stability, strong family ties. None of those factors outweighed the deliberate second strike. During one parole evaluation intake, he reportedly said, "If I had just let him file it, none of this would have happened." The statement was not public. It entered correctional psychology notes. Rachel received summary only because of ongoing professional coordination. Harold Ives completed his 6th year of incarceration with diminished pension and revoked supervisory certifications. His appeal attempts exhausted. He maintained he never intended violence, only containment. Containment, a word that defined both industrial procedure and human failure in this case. Clara Mercer's scholarship fund expanded into a regional compliance ethics initiative at the State University. Engineering students now studied case scenarios involving undocumented calibration changes and escalation risk during supervisory confrontation. One assignment required students to analyze decision trees. Option A, report deviation. Option B, correct quietly. Option C, delay documentation. Option D, confront whistleblower. Daniel had chosen escalation to external oversight. Victor and Harold had chosen confrontation. Decision trees rarely illustrate the emotional surge within a room, but they clarify branching outcomes. Rachel archived physical evidence according to retention statute, the loose conduit rack inventory photograph, the forklift hydraulic log printout, the soil compression models, the gravel pit excavation images, the annotated waveform of the 9/11 call. The waveform remained the most distilled artifact. 17 seconds, a beginning and an end. In quiet hours, Rachel replayed the recording one final time before sealing it into long-term digital vault. At full speed, it sounds chaotic. At half speed, it reveals structure. At quarter speed, it reveals intent. The unlock tone, footsteps, the pre-alarm chirp, the metallic collision, a breath drawn sharply, a word almost formed, a second impact, a body collapsing, the abrupt void. 17 seconds separating procedure from panic. 17 seconds separating employment dispute from homicide. 17 seconds that resisted erasure. Rachel had learned early in her career that unresolved cases linger differently than solved ones. They hum beneath other investigations. They create friction in decision-making. Daniel Mercer's case would not hum. It would archive cleanly. Not because it lacked complexity, but because every recoverable element had been extracted. The irrigation canal continued to carry runoff beneath morning cyclists. The gravel pit resumed aggregate deliveries. The fabrication plant met production quotas under revised oversight. The executive who once oversaw both warehouse and plant resigned quietly. No monument marked Bay 3, but the trench beneath its grate remained permanently sealed. On her final review note, Rachel entered a single line into the system. Digital exhaust confirmed sequence. She closed the file. The system timestamped the closure at 9:42 p.m., 2 years later to the minute of the call that began it all.